Welcome back once again to Star or Shovelware. My name's Luke, and today on the channel I'm bringing you the first episode of a new series I'm looking at putting out called Dollar Deals, in which I pick out 5 random games from the eShop, all priced at a couple of dollars at most, and then take them for a spin to find out if any of them are actually worth buying. And we may be literally scraping the bottom of the barrel here, especially with some of these budget titles, but we may actually discover some hidden gems, and hopefully I'll give you a few laughs along the way. With that said though, please do drop a comment down below if you enjoyed this episode and want to see more from this series, drop me a like and a sub to support both me and the channel, and let's get right on into it. So we're kicking things off then with a game called Chickens on the Road, which is permanently priced at under $1, and as soon as I saw this game I knew I was in for a royal treat, as it's developed by Random Spin Games, the same team who brought us those 2 other shit encrusted gems, Disco Cannon Airlines and Funny Truck. After booting up the game I was presented with this menu which simply prompted me to press A to start. I had no options, barely any atmosphere, and the most interesting feature was the odd tumbleweed rolling its way across the screen, which actually turned out to be a metaphor for the entire game. Now, upon starting I was plopped down into an empty road and greeted with an ever so familiar control scheme near identical to the one found in Funny Truck, whereby a single thumbstick controls all of the movement. And the aim of this one is to basically drive down this everlasting highway, mowing down these little yellow creatures which are supposedly chickens, but actually look more like Mongo Mr. Potato Heads. I mean, look at the state of this one, that is not a chicken. Anyway, we're actually supposed to be collecting them despite them bursting into a plume of feathers as we roll on over them. For each of the yellow chickens we collect we earn some points, seen in the top left corner, and for each of the green ones we lose some points, though this sometimes doesn't even work. If we collide with any of the oncoming vehicles it's game over, though again this sometimes doesn't work either, and you actually end up keeping your score, but regardless of this there's no high score leaderboards, so it's pointless anyway. That's about it though, that's the entirety of the game. The music is a monotonous bass line which repeats infinitely, the chickens make a squeaking sound when you hit them, like you're walking over a wet floor in sneakers, and there's no actual way to mute this shit. Overall it's an okay concept as an arcade game, but it gets boring after about 5 minutes, and I'd say it's definitely not worth the $1 that I paid for it. Next up then we have Mike Dies, a game in which you get to play as this angry looking ginger fella called Mike, who is presumably angry because he dies so much, but from what I can gather you're basically trapped on a spaceship and have to find a way to escape. Now this one has been on sale for under $1 in the US since October 2021, but for some reason is still priced at £7.49 in the UK. No idea why, but getting into the gameplay, Mike Dies is essentially a puzzle platformer in which you have to guide our flame herder Donis through rooms full of portals, seen here as grey looking static patches, with the objective being to reach the exit portal to proceed to the next level. The portals automatically activate after standing inside them for a few seconds, but the problem here is that not all of these patches are big enough to fit Mike's chubby little frame inside them, but they will still teleport whatever part of Mike is within them, so they also act as the game's hazards, slicing off limbs and decapitating you in hilariously gruesome ways. As you proceed through the game, things get more creative with new varieties of portals for you to contend with, environmental hazards such as these freezing areas where Mike will shatter into a million pieces if he spends too long in them, and plenty of different chase sequences full of insta-kill boulders. Your path to freedom isn't linear either. In some of the levels you'll find these orbs, which if you collect enough of them will open up additional portals leading to new areas, so there's plenty of back and forth to be done in the game, and there's also a ton of different secret areas for you to find, which often take a bit of thinking outside the box. Now, I actually spent way more time playing this one than I thought I would. It's challenging but not too tough. I found that new mechanics were introduced at a decent enough pace so things didn't get boring, and it doesn't hold your hand, it just pushes you to try out different things until you succeed. The story is also fully voiced, which was nice, and overall I was rather surprised by how enjoyable I found this one. It feels like a solid little puzzle platformer, and I'd say it was well worth the $1 I spent on it. Our third title today then is Beatcop, a game which regularly goes on sale for just a couple of dollars, and I really like the look of the pixel art in this one, which is the primary reason I decided to give it a go. Now, the game sees you playing as Jack Kelly, a detective busted down to street cop after the senator's diamonds were stolen, and perhaps it seems something significantly more valuable, but it looks like you're potentially being framed for the job, and so now you've been given 3 weeks in which to solve the case and clear your name. In order to do so, you're going to have to work the beat, patrolling the streets, gathering information and asking the right questions. But all the while you've got your daily ticket quota to meet, bad guys to arrest, and any other taskings which come over the radio from Central, which include things like responding to robberies, stolen cars, punch-ups and even murders. Levels in the game though are presented in days, and at the start of these you're given a list of taskings to complete from the precinct sergeant. Failing to complete all of the taskings results in your pay being docked, while going above and beyond results in a bonus. But all of your actions in game have an influence on your reputation as an officer, as well as how the different factions perceive you, those being the Italian Mafia and the Crew, a gang of black street hustlers. These two factions appear to be rivals in a bit of a turf war, and completing tasks for one usually involves pissing off the other, but it's entirely up to you whether you want to actually get involved and side with one of them, or toe the line and keep your nose clean. However, you do need cash to pay your alimony, and these guys are all too happy to pay you for your service. Gameplay in this one though is pretty cool, and I really like the hustle and bustle of the streets as people go about the ways and random events unfold throughout the day, keeping you on your toes and providing you with bonus objectives to complete. But one of the most enjoyable aspects for me was the atmosphere and language, as the game is set in the 80s and doesn't shy away from the grittiness of the era, especially when it comes to capturing the whole tone of the time with casual racism still being rife. But there's also plenty of amusing dialogue to be had and unique characters for you to meet. While I could definitely see the whole daily tasking thing potentially becoming a little bit repetitive, it seems like the storyline is what's really driving this one, and for a couple of dollars I'd say it's definitely worth a play. Our penultimate game today is Toree 3D, a title which is permanently priced under $1 and one that I've been meaning to check out now for some time, as I'm a big fan of the classic N64 and PlayStation era vibes that this one is sporting. And the game is essentially that, a classic 3D platformer with very simple controls and objectives. Get to the end of each level in as fast as time as possible, along the way collecting as many shiny stars as you can. Now, there are a total of 13 levels in the game which come in 4 different themes, each of which presents its own challenges and unique mechanics for you to contend with, such as wind turbines, icy floors and moving traffic, and there are essentially 3 different variants of increasing difficulty for each level type. The levels themselves are pretty well put together. They're all bite-sized, lasting around 3 to 4 minutes at most, and the layouts often have little shortcuts built into them, ideal for speedrunning. In addition to the main hazard, which is basically you falling off the platforms, there are also enemies dotted about the place which mainly serve as additional obstructions, and while there are a few more trickier jumps, overall the difficulty level is pretty tame, and each of the levels has a few different checkpoints for you to start over from. Now, I was able to complete the game in under an hour, so there's not a huge amount of content on offer here, but for $1 I'd definitely say it's worth picking up. I did find the controls to be a little bit fiddly, mainly due to how your character maintains momentum while in the air, and the camera can be a bit of a pain at times. But overall, Toree 3D is a great little throwback to classic 3D platformers, and for me the jank just added an element of authenticity to it. All in all, a decent game and well worth $1 in my opinion. So we're topping off today's list with a spot of horror and taking a look at a game called Welcome to Hanwell, which usually goes on sale every few months, and it's advertised as an open world horror set in a city in which your worst nightmares have apparently become an everyday part of life, with monsters known as anomalies roaming the streets, and the town's population shut up in the houses for protection. It clearly takes influence from the original Silent Hill games, with you having a radio which plays static whenever enemies are near, rusty pipes to use as melee weapons, and fog-filled streets to wander around, but it switches things up to a first-person perspective. Now, right from the get-go, the game doesn't really hold your hand. You crawl out of a mortuary fridge, find yourself in some kind of basement, run through a bit of a tutorial and potentially get murdered by some big T-virus bastard. But after escaping to the surface, there's zero direction on what to do next. And while I do enjoy a spot of exploration, there's absolutely no context given as to who you are, what you're doing here, or what the game's objective is. It wasn't until I found my way inside this house that I discovered that I was actually required to find 6 pieces of a citizenship card scattered about the town, but the reasons for this were still not clear. Now, story-wise, it seems that some doctor was messing about performing human experiments and accidentally released a bunch of these anomalies on the town. Those who tried to oppose him were incarcerated, and other people just went absolutely mental, like the priest who tried to expel the demonic forces from this poor girl. But it's all a little bit wishy-washy, and you really have to hunt down the audio logs and handwritten notes in order to get the full picture. When it comes to gameplay, like I said, you have to travel to different points of interest like the church, a prison and a school to find these card pieces, but the distance between them is pretty ridiculous, and I spent the majority of my playtime just running from one location to the next. I did encounter a bunch of anomalies along the way and fought them off without much of an issue, but for the most part the town is absolutely barren aside from a bunch of other collectibles scattered about the place, which presumably lead to alternative endings. Now, once you reach the notable locations, for some reason you've got to drop your weapon before you can actually enter them, and once inside you'll usually find yourself just searching the building, listening to a few audio logs, and solving some very simple puzzles to retrieve the card pieces, and that's about it. There is the odd jump scare here and there, and in the prison I released another tyrant, but he was nowhere to be found when I wandered about hoping to meet him, and in general I just didn't find the game to be that scary. Overall though, Welcome to Hanwell seems like an ambitious title which falls flat in almost every aspect. The visuals and sound design are good, but the world is dull and empty, enemies are a rarity and not worth fighting, the puzzles are far too simple, and while the storyline seems pretty decent, unless you're hunting for audio logs and notes, you're likely to miss half of it. So all in all, not a great game, but may still be worth the couple of $1 asking price to some people. And so that just about does it for this first episode of Dollar Deals. Like I said though, let me know in the comments down below if you enjoyed it and want to see more, and make sure to drop your own suggestions for games that you'd like to see me cover in future episodes. As always though, thanks once again for watching, drop a like to help me out and consider subscribing if you enjoy my content, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.